This video is brought to you by my wonderful supporters over on Patreon. Check us out at the link in the description to get access to weekly guided ear training sessions and weekly guided practice routines. Hi everybody, Levi Clay here, and I am back again to talk about the subject of ear training. If you enjoy this video, please do hit that subscribe button. And of course, check out my weekly guided ear training sessions and my weekly guided practice routines over on Patreon. I'm going to be playing a little bit of keyboard today in this lesson, and as many of you know, I've only been learning the piano for, well, it's been over a year now actually, and I found it an incredibly useful tool for my ear training and for the practice of application of harmony on the instrument. Just giving me a better and more rounded sense of how harmony works. Much easier to do this stuff on the piano than it is doing it on the guitar. So again, if you would like to pick up the piano, there is a link in the description to my piano affiliate link. You can go over there and get yourself a free, completely free trial, 30-day trial, and I'll get paid for you signing up for a free trial. So do it. It's a great way to support the channel. Anyway, on with the subject of today's lesson, and that of course is dealing with the idea of being able to hear into the future. I know that seems kind of airy-fairy, but let's really get to the core of what it is that I'm talking about. The way I see ear training and a developed ear is it can fall into one of two categories. One of those categories is what I would call a reactive ear, and one of those categories is a proactive ear. Now, the reactive ear is an easy-ish thing to develop. So let's talk about what I mean when I say that. Now, a reactive ear is one where the ear can react to what it is hearing. Very simple in concept. So there are two ways that you can kind of think of this reactive ear. It can either be reactive based on knowledge, or it can be reactive solely based on hearing. Some people might call that feel, right? So if I approach this in the most simple way that I possibly could, if I play a C major chord for you, I'm going to play a note against that. And without thinking about it, I want you to tell me whether or not that note is a good note or a bad note, whether it sits on the chord or it doesn't. So here's the note, here's the chord, and here's my note. Now, hopefully when you heard that, your initial thought was, well, that works, that fits on the chord, okay? So that would be using your ears in a reactive way, just by feel. Let me play a couple more notes over that chord. So if I play this note over the chord, hopefully you can hear that note wants to move. You want to resolve that note to come on home to the sound of the chord. We'll talk about how to practice this in a second. Just want you to understand the concept first. And you could take this to its logical extreme. You could play any manner of notes. If I play, this is not a comfortable note. Your ear wants this note to resolve. So in a reactive setting, you would like to think that you would do that. And from an improviser's perspective, if I were to play a chord and play a scale over the top, or something bluesier, doesn't matter what you're playing, you could improvise using that scale. We should be able to hear that when I land on this note, this isn't a note that you want to stay on. It wants to resolve. And that's what I would consider to be a reactive ear, whereby you are using the ear to hear whether or not the sound you're playing is a good one. Now, of course, there's a lot of, faith in this working. Sometimes your ears might not be on, and it's very risky to use this as a strategy. But I think this is the way that most players use an ear when it comes to improvising over a set of chord changes. Of course, the other kind of subset of a reactive ear is a knowledge-based ear. So if I tell you that this chord that I was playing was like a C7 sound, and then I tell you, well, I'm going to play the fifth over that, maybe your reactive ear and the knowledge that your reactive ear knows, well, the fifth is a stable sound over a dominant 7 chord, so you're okay with that as a sound. Whereas if I say I'm going to play the flat 2 over this chord, your knowledge and reactive ear might say to you, well, the flat 2 is tension that wants to be resolved, so I'll bring that down to the root note. It's still a reactive ear, but you're kind of using a little bit of your knowledge of theory in order to do the thing. You absolutely don't need that. You could purely base this purely on your ears, on the feel of things. Does this note sound good over the chord? So how do you go about practicing that? Well, it's very simple. You need to be able to play a chord, and when I play this chord, I need to be able to break that down and hear each individual note. Ba, ba, ba. These are my strong sounds, right? Ba, ba, ba. And everything I hear in relation to that, ba, 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 I hear in relation to the sound that I'm hearing. It's either tension or it sits comfortably on the chord. So if you want to put a bunch of time into that and you want to practice that as a concept, I would encourage you to go about playing chords and singing the notes of your chords. I'm just dealing in triads here, so you could be playing a set of chord changes. Anything that you could play, if you should always be able to sing the notes of the chord. And of course, that's going to be difficult for you at the early stages. No doubt about it. That's going to be tricky for you to work on. But the more time you devote to that, the easier you're going to find that as a skill. And before you know it, you'll be hearing richer sounding chords and you'll more comfortably be able to sing the notes that are in the chord. That's paramount to developing a reactive ear. That's the reactive ear, though. Let's talk about the trickier one, the kind of mystical, the proactive ear. So again, this could still be broken down into a set of two subsets: knowledge and ears, or kind of feel, if you like. So a proactive ear comes into play when you are dealing with playing over a set of chord changes. Now, this is really, when you think about it, a terrifying concept, because it's one thing to be able to play a melody over the top of a chord or a backing track or whatever it happens to be that you're playing over, a sound that exists, and you're hearing what you're playing in relation to what you're playing over. It's an entirely different thing to have that proactive ear that can not just hear what you're playing over the chord that you're playing over, but your ear can hear the chord that hasn't happened yet. Your ear can focus so much on not just where you are, but where you are going. And you can hear the melody that you're playing in relation to what's coming. You can hear the melody and how you want to craft that melody in order to take it to the chord that you're going to, rather than the chord you are on. I appreciate that this is a terrifying concept. It's exciting in terms of like the potential that you can see, but terrifying in this is the Everest of ear training, right? Being able to hear chords that haven't happened yet. I always vividly remember seeing Joe Pass on his instructional videos playing licks and saying, and I like this one because you can really hear the chord behind it. There was no chord. There was no chord there. He just had an ear developed where you could hear a chord that wasn't being played, right? And that you can develop that, but to be able to hear a chord that hasn't happened yet, this takes time, this takes understanding. So how would I encourage you to go about working on that? Well, if we start without dealing in knowledge, just dealing in feel, if I take a chord progression, if I take a 1-4-5, C, F, and G, if I can play a C chord and know that that is going to go to my F chord, and then feel that's going to go to my G, back to my C, I'll voice that slightly differently. When I play through that, what I want you to be able to do is I want you to be able to hear each individual note of that chord. So if I take the root note, for example, ba, we need to be able to hear that F chord before it happens. So when I play C, this note, ba, is going to stay where it was, ba. It's then going to go up, ba, for the next chord. And we could continue up, ba, to resolve that melody. We could also kind of twist it and go, ba, 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 bring it down, ba, ba. Not a singer. You should be able to do that with each melody note in that chord, each note in that chord. So if I take the third of the chord, ba, 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 stay where we are, ba, or we could tweak that a little bit, ba, 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 ba. Doing that for every note in a diatonic set of chord changes is going to influence your ability to hear what chords are coming. Because when I do that, I'm limiting myself purely to the notes that happen to be in the chords that I'm playing, right? That's very important. So when it comes to improvising in a setting like that, the same thing is going to be true. So I'm not an improviser on the piano, certainly not yet, right? So if I am playing around just with boring C major scale stuff, and then I know, deliberately playing really boring stuff, actually, to be honest. If you are improvising boring stuff, we should be able to hear this note in relation to the chord that we're going to. And it wants to resolve down to go to that F chord, okay? If I was playing, It wants to go down again to, we're going to G, aren't we? And then I can hear that note going up again for my C. Now, that's, in a very limited and boring setting, a set of chord changes, 1, 4, 5 is diatonic, but this is going to feel easy. When you start putting yourself in settings where the chords are maybe a little bit less diatonic, so if I take a different set of chord changes, if I took C major, going to D7, going to F minor, going to C, I'm definitely a little bit lower in register. Let me play that higher for you. So here's my C major, here's my D7, here's an F minor, and here's a C. Being able to really hear this, you need to be able to hear that set of chord changes and take, for example, the melody note on each of those chords. So over the C, it's going to go up. Ba, ba. It's going to come down chromatically. Ba, ba. That's having an ear that can hear a melody that goes through the chord changes. Now, of course, we're talking about the most boring melody possible, a single note on each chord. But you will not be able to hear more complex melodies over chords until you are in a position where you can hear a static single note idea that's going to go through it. Because ultimately, when I'm playing over that C, if I were to play... Like I say, I'm not a piano improviser yet. I can hear chord changes when they're not there, and that's, of course, my ultimate goal. I want to... Obviously, me improvising around in that setting there on an instrument that isn't my primary instrument it's fun for me and it's challenging for me. Even though I'm not achieving even close to the levels that I want to be achieving in this setting, I can still engage my ear in this in a way that I was unable to engage my ear in this 5-10 years ago on my main instrument. So really thinking, trying to think ahead and hearing those chord changes is certainly a very challenging one. And of course, the other side of that proactive ear side of things is knowledge. Now, I think knowledge is important. I think knowing things and understanding things and being able to learn things and apply things is a helpful tool. But at its core, the ears or the feeling of the chord change, significantly more important. So an example in this, obviously, of the kind of knowledge-based approach to this, you could be thinking, when I'm playing over that C chord, this is me playing, let's say I'm playing like a blues scale idea, knowing that the next chord is D and being able to see the notes I'm playing and then going, okay, well, I'm currently playing C, this is the flat 7 of D, not the strongest note, I could resolve to the root of D and that's going to do the job for me, and I could play... And then, okay, F is happening. I could move down a tone to the C because that's going to be the 5th of my F chord. I can play I can play arpeggio, resolving to the 3rd of C, and that's me thinking from a more knowledge-based approach rather than really trying to engage that ear, really trying to listen to what I'm playing, hear or imagine a chord that hasn't happened yet, and hear how what I'm playing will resolve to the chord that hasn't happened yet. It really is the trickiest thing to develop, but the most important skill for being able to improvise fluently over, I was going to say chord changes, but I would say anything. Being able to improvise over anything on your chosen instrument if you are an improvising musician, is important, and being able to remove that sense of hope. I just hope that the note I'm going to land on is a good one here. Being able to remove that reactive ear, which is hoping that I'm going to land on the right note, but knowing I might not, but I'm reactive enough to be able to correct it when I get there. We don't want that. We don't want to react to what happens. We want to be in control of what happens. We want to land our notes perfectly, not have a panic, and be able to correct it. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the difference between a reactive and a proactive ear. Get to work. Lastly, I just want to say a huge thank you to my wonderful supporters over on Patreon. I could not do this without your love, kindness, and support, so thank you so much for all of that support. If you would like to join us over on Patreon, get access to weekly guided ear training sessions, which, this ties into, or of course weekly guided practice routines, which are a lot more challenging. New one just went up today. Then please do go and check us out there. If that doesn't suit, you can also head on over to Amazon, and I have lots of books available. There's some of them, but I have a lot more. Please do go and check them out. They keep the lights on. I'm all about having the lights on in this studio, so very much supported. As electric bills are going up significantly, so if you would like to help with those costs, please do consider checking us out at the link in the description. Thank you so much for checking this video out, guys. If you have any questions about this, please do let me know in that comment section below. I'm happy to engage. Hit that subscribe button, check out the link to Piano, and I will see you for another video next week. Laters.